Joining us, folks, there we go. Take a look. Joining us in New York, trial attorney, legal women's advocate Angela Dorn is with us. Here in studio, from left to right, we've got Randy Kessler, trial attorney and law professor. Holly Waltman, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. And of course, you know, Kirk Nurmi represented Jodi Arias years ago. All right, folks, and we'll start here. No means no, right? So if there's no ambiguity to this situation, this isn't in the gray area, right? It's either a rape or she's making this all up.
Not necessarily, Vinny. No means no, and it always means no, and there's no gray there. But what we have now is the transcript of someone, if believed by 12 people that we don't know, transcribed by someone on Court TV. It's a game of telephone.
But she's saying no.
She said it, but it has to be.
She testified to the word no how many times? 1, 2, 3, 4. So, I mean, she is saying no to Harvey Weinstein. Once you say no and you continue to force someone, that is rape.
That is
correct?
rape.
Right?
Is
that
believed.
rape?
It's if believed, though.
Well, it goes to her credibility. You're saying she said no. No. What she's saying now is that she said no. And if she is to be believed, that helps the prosecution. But if the jury doesn't believe them, they say, well, that's after the fact. She wanted to cover up because she did it consensually.
Yeah, but the defense here cannot argue that it was an ambiguous sexual situation where, oh, I didn't know that she wanted me to stop.
If they believe that she said no.
And the difficult thing...
Right, which would mean the only alternatives here are rapist or we have an accuser who is committing perjury right now.
No, you have consensual sex. There's something in the middle. She is saying no now in front of the cameras or in front of the people that are in the courtroom that are recounting this trial, but what's not to say that it wasn't consensual when it happened? The problem with sexual cases is that there's only 2 people there most often. And those 2 people are the only 2 people that really know what happened.
Yeah, but only one of them is going to testify. Guarantee that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, though. I think at the end of the day, either the jury believes her testimony and it's a rape or it's not. Consensual sex is in the category of not a rape. So that's really at the heart of the defense strategy, right, to say this isn't truthful, this account isn't truthful.
Angela Dorn, legal women's advocate, trial attorney, you know this stuff inside out. Was there any ambiguity in the situation that is being described by Mimi Haley?
No, there really isn't any ambiguity. When you hear the witness testify, she's saying over and over again that she said no, she said no, she said no, probably 10 or 20 times during the course of the encounter. But the panelists are right. It's really a question of does the jury believe what she's testifying to?
Does the defense get up and say she came in here and didn't tell the truth? I mean, because the other argument, and I understand the other argument was like, okay, it's a situation where we don't know exactly what's going on, where 2 people are together consensually, and then, you know, one person is like, you know, I don't want to do this, but maybe doesn't verbalize it, or the other person isn't reading the signals right, and I understand that gray area. I understand it. But there's no gray area here.
Well, that's why we have a jury trial. And jurors come in with their own common experience. And some jurors may have had situations where they were a little resistant to having sex. And after the fact, they were embarrassed, so they said, I said no. It depends on what those jurors' backgrounds are. But again, if they believe her and she said no, then it's conviction.
Game over. All right, when we come back, we talked about the direct, right? That was one part of the testimony. The true test always for any witness is cross-examination. But today, the defense went on the offensive, attacking this accuser. We've got that for you next.
Do you recall anything about what happened?
Yes. He pulled or led me onto the bed, and I didn't resist physically. I just laid there.
What did he do?
He had intercourse with me.
Do you recall anything about what's wrong? Was anything being said between him and you?
He said things like he said something like, you're a whore and a bitch. But I think in a way, which he thought that was going to somehow turn me on.
Objection. Speculation.
Overruled.
I was like motionless and just saying, I'm not a bitch. I'm not a whore.
That was Mimi Haley, and it's about 2 weeks after the alleged rape that she's then having what she described as quasi-consensual sexual intercourse with Harvey Weinstein afterwards. And it came out on direct examination, also talked about, though, during the cross-examination. Angela Dorn, your thoughts about what that means. What does that tell us about what happened? Should we read into this?
No, I don't think we should read into this. It tells us that these types of situations, and many of us know this because we know people who've experienced these types of attacks, are incredibly complex, particularly where there's a power relationship. And there was also testimony earlier in the trial from a person who was an expert on sexual offenders and the reactions of the victims, who talked about the reactions of victims are not necessarily what you would expect in all instances. The jury will be told, and the jury will be reminded, that they have to keep in mind everything that the witness testified to. The beginning, where she talked about a situation where she clearly said no multiple times and provided great details in that situation about a very awkward sexual encounter, as well as this other story, which is probably not as easy for people to understand.
So, Mimi Haley was cross-examined today, and Chanley Painter and Julie Janae were describing the tone of that, and it was accusatory. They were going after her. Let's take a listen here to some of that cross-examination, and there was apparently a meeting, of course, in Cannes.
When you saw him in Cannes, you did not walk away and go in the other direction, did you?
No.
You still had his phone number.
Yes.
You still used it, still talked to him.
Yes.
And Mr.
Yes, not often, but yes, occasionally.
This is the same Harvey Weinstein who asked you to come to his apartment in Soho, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Weinstein responded to this email, did he not?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein's response was, Miriam, you are a genius. It is good to hear from you. All my best, Harvey.
Yes.
The same Harvey Weinstein whose apartment you were in on July 10th, 2006.
Yes.
Same Harvey Weinstein you reached out to after you saw him at Cannes.
Yes.
So again, it was that classic accusatory, fast-paced cross-examination of someone who says they're a victim of a sexual assault. Kirk Nermi, what are your thoughts about that tone, that approach going after this complaining witness?
I thought what we heard here is methodical. There wasn't a lot of emotion in it, so while it might have been rapid fire, it was very methodical. It stuck to the facts. It wasn't accusatory in calling her promiscuous or anything else. It just went straight at her actions that might mitigate against the idea that she was a victim of sexual assault. Because common sense, and they have an expert, as we just heard, to kind of battle common sense, perhaps. And he went through and just laid out common sense arguments that would put question into the juror's mind about reasonable doubt. Would a true rape victim act in the way that she did, the way that she admitted to acting?
I want to take that clip and show it to my law school class where we teach jury trials. I mean, as a law professor, he was testifying. He didn't say, did you see him? You did not walk away. You still had his phone number. And the witness was saying, yes, yes, yes. He told the jury what he wanted the jury to hear. You did this, yes. He did not ask. So it was a good example of how to cross-examine a witness.
Any concern here of attacking a victim of sexual assault? All right, let's lay it out here, gender-wise. He's male. He's the prosecutor. He's the defense attorney, and he's going after the female victim. The first accuser that took the stand, Donna Rotuno, did the examination. This time, does that work? Can it work?
It
for the
depends.
defense?
Can it work? Yes. Did it work today? I think so. Does it oftentimes fail? And does oftentimes a male cross-examining an accuser come across as bullying? Yes. But this was methodical. I think no one here can debate the fact that Harvey Weinstein's status, his financial ability to get this caliber of a defense team has worked. These questions were deliberate. They have had these lined out and methodically thought through. They stuck to the script. I think it worked today. And I think that in sort of a psychological way, it could have flip-flopped or switched maybe a female juror who would have otherwise seen a male attacking this accuser. So I think today that was a very good cross-examination, and to Randy's point, yes, this would be a great example for a law school class.
And we have more. Let's take a listen to more, because apparently this accuser, Mimi Haley, went to the hotel. Let's take a listen.
When you get to the Hotel Majestic, you get brought to Mr. Weinstein's room, right?
Yes.
The two of you, according to your testimony, have a brief conversation about whatever.
Yes.
At some point you say, Mr. Weinstein asked you about massages.
Yes.
He asked you if you'll give him a massage, or at some point if he can give you a massage, right?
Correct.
At this point, you told the members of the jury you were very upset, to say the least, right?
I was offended. Yes.
You were offended because this was a business meeting. You thought you were going to potentially talk about Project Runway.
No, not Project Runway at that point.
Something else?
I went there to meet him to ask if he had any production work I could help on. Yes.
She's looking for work. He's looking for a massage, and then some. Angela Dorn, I mean, to me, this is completely inappropriate, obviously, right? You don't, at a business meeting, you don't ask someone for a massage. That's ridiculous. It's absurd. Do you think the jury's getting a picture of what Harvey Weinstein is? And is that a picture that equals someone who takes advantage of his situation to coerce people into sex, or someone who forces himself upon people?
I do think that the jury is getting a sense of who Harvey Weinstein is. I think that it's still a little bit unknown. Definitely he takes advantage of power. It would appear that he takes advantage of power situations and asks inappropriate questions in settings which he knows that a person wants one thing and he puts forward what he wants. The jury's getting that sense. Coercion versus forcing are two very different things, but the two parties will lay down arguments and present evidence on both those issues. The prosecution will say that he both coerces and forces, and the defense might just settle on maybe a little coercion.
All right, I want to take a quick survey. If we can take a quick survey of everyone here tonight. And Angela, you're still on screen, so you can participate. We can see you. Please raise your hand if you've ever been at a business meeting and the discussion of massages came up, whether you were the one who brought it up or someone else brought it up to you, or other coworkers were talking about mutual massages, or a massage for him, a massage for her during a business meeting. Ready?
Not counting our clients' cases.
Right, not counting the cases. But it doesn't, this is so creepy. Can the jury get beyond that? I mean, this guy's creepy. He's inappropriate. We know he is. He's an animal.
Okay, there's inappropriate and there's creepy, and then there's a crime. There's a difference, right? You can say somebody's inappropriate, somebody's exploiting their position, but does that mean that it's a crime? It's not a crime to ask for a massage during a business meeting.
All right, but folks, just giving you some legal advice. Don't do it, okay? Nothing good will come from it. All right, when we come back, you've heard from us. It's time for us to hear from you. Your reaction on social media today to Mimi Haley is next.
911 emergency.
Can you get someone over here now?
Okay, what does he look like?
He's O.J. Simpson. I think you know his record.
On the next episode of OJ 25.
Who's gonna kill you? She said OJ.
Maybe CourtTV had the focus on Mr. Ship.
I just looked at him and said, I'll testify.
An all-new original true crime series, OJ 25. New episode Thursday night at 9/8 Central. Only on CourtTV.
Massages, and if I can give him a massage. And I declined and said perhaps he should contact the front desk and organize one. And then he proceeded to ask me whether he could give me a massage, and I declined. And
after you declined the massage, what happened?
Again, that's the part of the conversation that I remember mostly. But I basically left shortly after, and I didn't think anything would come out of that meeting.
All right, the big witness today, the first complaining witness, remember, associated with her first-degree counts as well as the predatory count to which Harvey Weinstein could face life in prison. Important witness, Mimi Haley. But she did testify today that a little over 2 weeks after the alleged rape that she described for the jury, she engaged in quasi-consensual intercourse with Harvey Weinstein, a little over 2 weeks after this alleged attack. So a lot of reaction on social media to that, and we begin with our comment of the day from Bridget. Unfortunately, if I was a juror, this testimony could cause me some serious reasonable doubt. Unlike Shiora's testimony, it's hard not being in the courtroom, hearing the actual voices and seeing facial expressions and tone. But on testimony alone, this is on the fence of contradicting a rape allegation, in my opinion. She alleges she said no to forced oral sex, but consented 2 weeks later. What? Mixed signals. Mixed signals. Angela Dorn in New York City for us tonight, just outside the courthouse. Mixed signals. And I can understand how a juror could react this way. Is it possible to be raped and then engage in consensual sex with the same person after the rape?
Unfortunately, I have to say that it absolutely is possible. It has happened. Other rape victims have testified to the same type of conduct occurring. The fact of the matter is that 85% of people who are involved in sexual assaults or rapes know the people who assaulted them, know the people who raped them. They continue to have relationships with those people, and unfortunately, they can be victimized on multiple occasions.
All right, next comment coming from Kimmy, who writes, quasi-consensual? Seriously? Either you consented or you didn't. Can't cry rape if there was consent. And what she is saying is that there was a lot of regret afterwards. A lot of regret.
Regret does not equal rape. And criminal intent can be formed in a second. Consent can be given and taken away in a second. And so I'm kind of with Kimmy here. Quasi-rape is not. It is rape.
Quasi-consent, I think she's conceding.
Quasi-consent.
She's conceding that this was consensual. She wasn't excited about it. It wasn't like on her to-do list of things she wanted to do that day. But she did do it.
But as far as a prosecution is concerned and how they lay out their case.
Not charged with that act, but the one 2 weeks before.
I know, but this is their star witness. This is the one that they came out of the gate with first. This needs to be the strongest, most solid testimony they have. And I'm with Kimmy, I'm with Bridget. This is, at best, in the middle, and that is not proof beyond reasonable doubt.
Listen to what Margie's writing today. This is really interesting. Sex abuse grooming. Second time was already groomed by the first.
You don't get prosecuted on grooming. You get prosecuted on that one set of facts and that one event. And I think
what Margie's saying here, Randy, and again, I'm interpreting a little bit, is saying that, listen, she was victimized once, and now she was almost defenseless going forward.
Yeah, well, then you need a psychologist to come testify, and it's a lot deeper of a case. I mean, the prosecution's case is she said no, he didn't respect that, that's all. And I think that's vitiated by the post-act consensual sex. I mean, that comment by Bridget, the first one you read, that should be in the defense counsel's closing argument.
Kirk, is it going to be difficult for this jury to understand that someone can have consensual sex with someone that's raped them?
I think so, because like Bridget has said to us, you know, she didn't like this testimony because I think most people know that Harvey Weinstein, at least in my opinion, was a sexual predator. But this casts serious doubt. I mean, there is no testimony, there's no psychologist, as Randy said, that's going to talk about this grooming behavior. It's like, it doesn't make sense. So they had this psychologist, and the question is she going to penetrate common sense? Because if someone was like Bridget, with her mindset, was on the jury, she might be inclined to acquit.
Jennifer, tonight, in my opinion, I don't think a rape victim is going to refer to the encounter as sex. Angela, is it semantics, or is there a difference in the way things like this are described by accusers and victims?
There absolutely is a difference, and I want to speak up for the woman who's claiming she was sexually assaulted here. She's making a distinction between the first encounter, which was not consensual, she said, and said over and over again, no, I do not consent to this. But she's also acknowledging that there was an additional encounter in which she is admitting was consensual. That's a tough bit of testimony for a rape victim to give, but, you know, this is who we have.
Yeah. And Randy, shouldn't that actually add to her credibility? That level of honesty? of saying, all right, I really didn't want to be there, I regretted it, but I cannot say I did not consent that second time.
Yeah, it adds to her credibility, but the bottom line is jurors are going to jump to conclusions. They're going to say, I mean, the prosecution led them down. He raped her, he did this, and then they said, aha. The defense told me during opening I should wait to hear both sides of the story, and now I've heard the other side. And the prosecution has that burden, right? They got to have all the facts on their side pretty much to get rid of any reasonable doubt. When you got facts going both ways, it's a bad day for the prosecution.
Hey, don't jump the gun.
Sorry,
You're
man.
just jumping the gun.
Always.
Randy's always acting up. All right. Linda writing tonight. I was skeptical at first as far as consent, but let's get real. This guy has the same method of operation and uses his Hollywood status, certainly wasn't his looks, to lure them right where he wanted them. Vinnie, you're right. No means no. Not to mention, even if they did consent at one point, they could have still been raped. Contacting him after wasn't the best of decisions, though. Not a great decision. Harvey Weinstein, powerful guy in the business. We understand all of that. But let's get back to the no, right? No can be at any point, right? Two people are together, they're intimate. And don't we teach our kids this? Or try to at least?
You bet. No means no. And she's right. Consent, like we just said earlier, consent or lack thereof can change at any moment. But we even heard from the last viewer saying that wasn't the best decision. Even somebody who believes Harvey Weinstein is this awful person is questioning the accuser's judgment in this case.
Jeannie has another great point tonight. Let's take a look at that. Her history with abuse may have led to some of her decisions. In the beginning of her testimony, she laid out a history of abuse unrelated to Harvey Weinstein, but just part of who she was. And a lot of us are wondering, why are prosecutors doing that? Could it be a way to explain why she would go back to Harvey Weinstein?
It might, and I think the victim would have a much better chance of winning a civil case. We have this thing in law school, we teach the eggshell plaintiff. You take the plaintiff the way they come. You can't pick your victims. If your victim is more susceptible to being coerced, and you coerce them, you're guilty. So I think it's still a tough case with that post-act consensual sex.
Angela, your thoughts about what Jeannie said tonight, which is that her history with abuse, which the jury heard, unrelated to Harvey Weinstein, this is part of who she is, may have led to some of her decisions down the road. To me, that makes a lot of sense.
I agree. I think it does make a lot of sense. I do think, though, that last guest who talked about a civil case versus a criminal case, you're going to have a lot more people who are going to be sympathetic to that eggshell victim on the civil context. In the criminal case, people start thinking a lot harder about reasonable doubt, et cetera, and it can be harder to persuade them that you take your victim kind of as you get them.
All right, our final comment tonight comes from Bathsheba, who writes, I think it proves, like Bill Cosby, these women were not victims. They were opportunity seekers. Who goes around a man who forced himself on you a second time? Plus, most people's reputations precede them. He probably is a person who will use his power to get sexual favors, but the women probably thought they could give up sexual favors and he would make them a star or get them started in the movie business. What's interesting about this comment, like Bill Cosby, as we sit here tonight, do we all know where Bill Cosby is? He's behind bars. He was convicted. I'm wondering here, in that case, some of the same arguments were made.
Absolutely, and I think that there is a fear on the defense side that some of these jurors might be thinking about other superstars or other household names that we know that have been in this similar position. One of the things that I think is interesting, and I challenge you to this question, the accusing victim in this case just now self-reported that she had been sexually abused or had been in a victim of sexual abuse in the past. If she was in a defendant position, is that an argument that you would have taken with the same type of tenacity? And so without a doctor, like we were talking about earlier, is that just a self-serving statement, is what the state would call it if this person was in the defense seat?
All right, just so you don't think I'm not reacting, we're out of time for this segment.
Convenient.
Up next, a lot happened today, but who had a better day, the prosecution or defense? We'll hear from our think tank next.
When you got to the hotel, describe for the jury what happened.
The assistant let me inside of the room, the suite, and left. And so we just greeted each other normally and so forth. But all of a sudden, eventually, it turned into him asking if I did massages and if I can give him a massage. And I declined and said perhaps he should contact the front desk and organize one. And then he proceeded to ask me whether he could give me a massage, and I declined.
Did you have any interest in Harvey Weinstein romantically?
None at all, no.
Did you have any interest in Harvey Weinstein sexually?
None at all, no.
She told the jury how she met Harvey Weinstein. It was at that point the prosecutor asked her to identify Harvey in the courtroom, and she had a really distinct pause. Like she had wanted to brace herself before she reached over and looked at him and said, "Yes, I know Harvey Weinstein. There he is."
He pushed me down. He held me down by my arms, and I said, no, no. And at that point started realizing what was actually happening, and I'm being raped. He held me down on the bed, and he forced himself on me orally.
And what, if anything, did you say or do?
I was just crying, no. I kept trying to tell him, no, don't go there, don't do that. I said I'm on my period. I have a tampon in there, and it was as if he literally pulled my tampon out.
Did he continue placing his mouth on your vagina after that?
Yes.
What happened when you got to the Tribeca Hotel?
He pulled or led me onto the bed, and I didn't resist physically. I just laid there.
What did he do?
He had intercourse with me.
Was anything being said between him and you?
He said something like, "You're a whore and a bitch." I was like motionless and just saying, "I'm not a bitch. I'm not a whore."
It was emotional, it was poignant. The words that she was saying to this jury, you could tell they really were taking it in and hanging on every word. As she led up to this attack that she says happened, she says that she was verbally saying over and over that she did not want this to happen, and at some point she gave up.
You said, I noticed an article in today's New York Post about the Addams Family being turned into a play, a musical.
Yes.
Then you say to Mr. Weinstein, just to remind you what a genius I am, didn't I tell you that it was a great idea like 3 years ago at the Mercer Bar? You said that.
Yes.
Then you signed it. How did you sign that to Mr. Weinstein?
Lots of love, Miriam.
Now, the meeting you were referring to, the Mercer Bar, you testified about that in front of this jury earlier today, correct?
Yes.
That was the same summer where you told this jury you were sexually assaulted by Mr. Weinstein, correct?
Yes.
You were out in California for 2 weeks.
Correct.
Because Mr. Weinstein paid for your ticket there, and he paid for your ticket back, correct?
Correct.
Your friend was having a baby, and you asked him to fly you out.
No, incorrect.
Today had a big moment because he was able to elicit from her that, well, actually, he was calling me these names because he thought it would turn me on during sex in this encounter. And Harvey Weinstein, this was a moment for him because apparently he turned, looked at his attorney, Arthur Idella, and said, like, see there, it was during sex. See, you know, like good moment, big moment. And this was audible.
Day 4 in the books, but who had a better day, prosecution or defense? Let's bring back in our think tank. We begin with Angela Dorn, trial attorney, joining us outside the courthouse in New York. Who had a better day?
I do have a decision, but I'm going to explain it a little bit. Overall, I do think that the defense had a better day, but that doesn't mean that the prosecution didn't have a good day. We got a lot of really solid testimony from the victim, or the alleged victim, talking about what kind of a person Harvey Weinstein is. He's a bore. He takes advantage of his power to hurt other people. And she gave very solid testimony that the first encounter that she experienced was assault, was rape, with her testimony about having said no many, many times. At the same time, we have her other testimony about another consensual attack, which was problematic. And we also had very solid cross-examination by the defense. So I give the defense points for having had a better day because they diminished some of the witnesses' credibility.
Kirk Nurmi, who had a better day, prosecution or defense?
The defense. Ms. Halay's testimony was full of emotion. It could have been very powerful, but that textbook cross-examination took all the emotion out of the room. And if you were listening very carefully, at least the way I heard it, she contradicted herself. She said she had no sexual interest in Mr. Weinstein, but then again, she went back and had consensual sex with him. She might have been lying, or jurors might think she was lying when she was making that, if they saw that contradiction.
Holly Waltman, prosecution or defense today?
Chanley said it, Janae said it. Having this victim come up and admit with a lot of emotions that she quasi-consented the second time really builds up the fact that she is saying no, no, no. To me, today, the prosecution wins.
Randy Kessler, prosecution or defense?
I gave it away earlier, defense. Who writes their rapist lots of love? In fact, who writes their rapist? Defense.
All right, folks. Intense day inside the courtroom. Tomorrow is another day. And of course, Chanley Painter is joining us from outside the courthouse with a preview of what we can expect in day 2 of week 2 of the Harvey Weinstein rape trial.
Vinnie, tomorrow on day 5 in the trial of Harvey Weinstein, it's going to be a shorter